polynomial evaluation. Okay, so it can be in variety of context, but you must see that as a pattern, as an idea. Only when you see that as an idea, you will be able to apply, and then in a different context, now you can begin to think like this. When a problem that you have never solved was posed to you, all right, let me see how does this incremental solution look like. If the incremental solution itself is a very good solution, and if that gives you happily a very efficient one, fine, but at least you have something to begin with. Yeah, question?
What I am observing in this incremental design is that we have this uniformity of operation. But sometimes in our, it's not that apparent, the uniformity. How to bring out that uniformity, how to make it apparent? How can
No, see, this is a recommended way of doing it. Whether this is applicable in a context or not is to be examined in a context dependent fashion. Suppose for a particular problem, this way of extending either not feasible or messy or doesn't work out properly, you have to abandon this idea. This idea doesn't work for that problem, that's all. Right?
Can we actually mold the problem to head towards this idea?
Yes, most of the problems we will be able to do that.
Mold it.
Yeah.
So how do I think about that? How do I mold?
Same. See, any input that you have is a discrete input. Every discrete input will have an enumeration. You take matrix multiplication. It consists of n rows and n columns, right? So take a particular row and then keep considering that. So in that way it is possible for you to view a solution and you can present it in this incremental fashion. So it is possible in some cases. Where it is possible, here is a way to do it. I am not saying that every problem is solvable by incremental design. I am also not saying that incremental solution is the best way to attack a problem. I am not saying anything. All I am saying is, here is one pattern of wisdom. Here is one way of attacking a problem. And this way, if you use, you can probably do well. Okay?
It looks a lot easier and a time-saving approach, incremental solution.
Incremental solution is easy to visualize and design.
Yeah.
This may or may not be the best way to arrive at a solution. There may be other methods of solving the same problem doing better than incremental design. It is possible. Right? We are going to see such example. We are going to see such example where the incremental design will look as though it is the best, but we will improve it further. We will use a different strategy and then improve on that. Okay? Now, once you have formulated and visualized an incremental solution in this fashion, okay, several generalization and alternating interesting possibilities can be looked at. One is, why should I incremental by only one item? If I increment by one item and if the input size is n, I have to go through n such phases. Can't I jump ahead? Can't I gallop and then reach the answer fast? Okay, the answer is yes. In some context that is possible. And do you know a solution where you have incrementally solved the problem, but not by incrementing in one unit, but incrementing by big jumps and thereby quickly reach the answer? So this is where now you are actually what you are doing is you are searching for pattern. You know several algorithms. In fact, you know it. Only thing is you have not seen that as a pattern, so you are struggling. When I explain, you will realize that, oh my goodness, yes, indeed it is. You would agree. Right? All of you would have done it. Okay. So consider, for example, the fast way of finding the exponent of a number, computing a power n. How did you find a power n? Typically, if you want to find a power n, a power n, you can a into a into a into a, you can do it, right? But there is a clever way of finding it. Let me take a very simple example. A power 16, if you want, can start from a square, a4, a8, a16. Good. You are able to jump over and then reach. But if it is not a power of 2, if it is an arbitrary n, how would you jump? Well, you take the binary representation and that will tell you how to go about doing it. The same way that you would evaluate the binary number, okay, take for example 110, 1011. What is this value? 1 plus 2, 3, 11 plus 32, 43, 64, 107. Okay, all right, this is 107. Okay, you can get a power 107 as follows. Just follow the binary representation. You square it and then multiply with a if you find 1 there, otherwise go to the next step. For instance, how would you evaluate this? How will you convert this into binary to decimal? 1 into 2. So starting from 1 you get 2, the next bit is 1, so this goes to 3, and then 3 to 6, 6 plus 0 is 6, you have accounted for this, and 6 into 2, 12, 12 plus 1, 13, 13 into 2 plus 0, 26, you have accounted for this, 26 into 2 plus 1, 53, I have accounted for it, 53 into 2 plus 1, 107. So you do the same thing, start from a, square it on behalf of this value, you get a square, and multiply with a, you get a cube. Square it, you get a power 6, and you do not have to multiply with a because you have a 0 here. So if you have 0, do not do anything. If you have 1, multiply with a. So a power 6, here you have 1, so square it, you get 12, and you have 1, so multiply with a, 13. Now from this a power 26, and next is 0, so leave it as such, and then this a power 52, and next is 1, so a power 53. So in the worst case, what will you do? You will have, even if it is 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, you are going to square, you are going to multiply, square and multiply. How many squares, how many times you will square it? As many number of bits. How many multiplication you would do? The worst case, as many number of bits, because for on behalf of each one you are multiplying. Squaring is also a multiplication anyway, it is a into a, and this one is something and multiplying anyway. You can consider them as in one phase you perform 2 multiplication. And how many bits will be there in the representation of n? Log n bits will be there, therefore log n into 2, log n into 2 multiplications are sufficient. Okay, maximum, this is a maximum. Okay, compare that with this. If a power 1000 is to be computed, that will take 1000 steps, and this is going to take less than 20 steps. Okay, 20 multiplication, significant saving. Why? You have now designed an incremental algorithm where incrementing is done at a higher rate. Therefore, you should see the possibility, whether there is a possibility to increment at a pace better than trivial, simple, step by step incrementing. Okay? If there is a possibility, there may be a scope for improvement and you may gain some efficiency in that. Look for that. So, these are all strategies. Whether it is applicable in the context, you have to look at it. There may not be a particular way to gallop like it, like this example shows for a particular problem domain, right. For example, you may not be able to double up in our distance given n points, find the shortest pair. In that you may not be able to gallop like that, right. You cannot take another bunch of next bunch of some 20 points and then try to find the minimum distance. That does not make sense there. Therefore, galloping is inappropriate and inapplicable in that context. There I have to go through one point at a time and then that takes so much time, all right. So, you should see the appropriateness. We may increment, and if there is a scope for incrementing at a better way, then we should explore the possibility and then get it done. Okay. Now, I will give one of my very favorite puzzle and then explain to you the subtleties and nuances of incremental design. This puzzle is purely for pedagogic purpose. Okay. There is no real life application for this, though this puzzle itself is formulated from a real life problem. Okay. Once it had application, but now it is not. Okay. The puzzle is formulated as follows. There is an infinite wall and you stand somewhere here. So, it is extending on both sides to infinity. Okay, minus infinity plus infinity, right. There is a door somewhere and you do not know where the door is. From where you are standing, you do not know whether it is to the right or whether it is to the left, okay, and you do not know how far it is, that also you do not know, okay. You have to only walk. Assuming that it is n steps away, you do not know n, but assuming that it is n steps away, right, in how many steps you can locate the gate in terms of n as a function of n, right. For example, if you know n and if you know the direction, then obviously you can go in the direction n steps and you can finish the task. If you know n, but if you do not know the direction, then what you do is, suppose it is 10 steps away, that is all you know, but you do not know the direction. You take n steps here, you do not find the gate there, but you know that it is in the nth step only. So, you come back another n step to this direction. So, this way you make 2n. So, n plus 2n. In 3n steps you will certainly find it. You might find it in n steps or you might find it in 3n steps. Worst case is 3n. So, in 3n steps you might find. Here you know n. You know how many steps it is away, but you do not know the direction. Suppose you do not know the direction, you do not know the n, in how many steps you will take to reach it. You cannot keep on going in one direction. What if in that direction the gate is not there at all, right. So, if you keep going in one direction forever, that is all, you may not terminate because it is extending on both sides to infinity, right. So, you have to go back and forth, that is the only way, right. So, let us see. You start from here, first you go one step here, you do not find the gate, come back one step, you check whether it is at 1 or whether it is at -1, if it is not there, you come back here. Now you have to go up to 2, and if the gate is not there, you go up to minus 2, and if it is not there, you come back to origin. Again you go up to 3, if not minus 3, and so on. So the worst case occurs when the direction, initial direction in which you started does not have the gate, it is in the other direction. Suppose it is in the nth stage, but you are first going this way, let us say. So this is n, and it is at minus n, you have up to minus n minus 1 you have visited, here also n minus 1 you have visited, you have come to the origin, you do not find the gate, you go n step here, you do not find the gate, come all the way here in minus n, you have found the gate, you are stopping it. Okay. So how many steps you are taking in this strategy? This is incremental design. Why it is incremental design? First you see whether it is at a distance 1 away from where you stood. Then you check whether it is at a distance 2 away from where you stood. On either side you explore. That is because you do not know where it is and you do not know the number. So you see whether it is at 1, at a distance 1, at a distance 2, at a distance 3, and in this way you proceed, and finally in n step away it is there, therefore in that attempt you will find the gate. But in the meantime, how many steps you would have walked up and down? For a typical case, you start from here, go here, come back and come here. So 1, 2 plus 1, okay. So it is 1 plus 2 into 1 plus 1. Again 2 plus 2 into 2 plus 2. Again 3 plus 2 into 3 plus 3. Okay. In general, you will go like this up to n minus 1 plus 2 into n minus 1 plus n minus 1. Then what you do is you go in one direction n, in another direction 2n, and you will find the gate. So n plus 2n, that is all. You have found out the gate. This is the total number of steps you would have taken. So how many steps you have taken? So n minus 1 plus 2n minus 1 plus n minus 1 is 4n minus 1. So it is 4 into sigma I equal to 1 to n minus 1 of I plus 3n, that is 4 into n minus 1 by 2 plus 3n, that is 2n square minus 2n plus 3n, that is equal to 2n square plus n. So the number of steps that you have taken, okay, is 2n square plus n, because you have gone back and forth. This is because you have explored in one step at a time. Is it possible for you to design an incremental algorithm that works in factor of 2 steps? Okay, it is possible. You can think of that. For instance, what you can do is you start from 0, you go 1 and minus 1 here. Then you go 2 and minus 2 here. This is 0 and come back. Then you go 4 in the same direction and minus 4 in the same direction. Then 8 minus 8 and come back. Okay. Suppose n equal to 2 power k. So assume that n is 2 power. If n is not equal to 2 power k, we can still find out. It is easy. I will come to that case. Suppose n is 2 power k. Then in a given phase, how much you go? 2 power 0 plus 2 into 2 power 0 plus 2 power 0. Then 2 power 1 plus 2 into 2 power 1 plus 2 power 1. Again 2 square plus 2 into 2 square plus 2 square. In general, 2 power k minus 1 plus 2 into 2 power k minus 1 plus 2 power k minus 1. So, this is nothing but 4 into 2 power k minus 1 plus 2 power k minus 2 plus 2 power 0, which is 1. This is a geometric sum, and in this geometric sum you get 4 into 2 power k minus 1 by 2 minus 1, which is 1. So, this is the answer. No, this is up to k minus 1, and for n power 2 power k, you go in one direction 2 power k, you will not find it. In the other direction you go, and then you would find that. So, plus 3 into 2 power k. So, 4 into 2 power k minus 4 plus 3 into 2 power k, this is equal to 7 into 2 power k minus 4, this is equal to 7n minus 4. See, like magic, you have got a very efficient, you have taken much less number of steps now. Okay. This is an incremental solution where you have galloped towards the answer, and you could get a significant speed up here, right. This was taking 2n square plus n, and here you are taking only 7n minus 4 steps. Is 2n square plus n better or 7n minus 4 better? How do I check it? There is a simple trick for that. The trick that is used to assess these kind of different functions is called big O notation. So, I am going to introduce the big O notation, and then I will tell you what is suggested by that big O notation, how to use wisely the big O notation for judging the merits. Okay, and what is not implied by big O notation is also to be understood very clearly. Okay. Of course, here 2n square plus n and 7n minus 4 is such a simple function that you quickly see that for n equal to 10, that is 70 minus 4 is already 66. And this is 210. So, this is already, even for n equal to 10, this is larger. Let us say even for 5, that seems to be smaller than this, right. So, for all values this is going, that is going to be smaller than this. In this case, you are able to very easily find out a threshold beyond which that is definitely better than this. Simple functions. In general, when two weird functions are given, how do I check which one is going to be asymptotically better than the other? Okay. The judgment can be arrived at by looking at the big O value of these functions. The big O properties of these functions will give you some insight. Okay. So, the next important thing is, when you want to compare, right, you need to know mathematically on asymptotics and big O, small o and theta notation. This is important. Unless people have got thorough understanding of this and understood what is implied and what is not implied by this, they will not be able to comment in a right way using big O notation. Of course, getting a comment without big O notation, if it is possible, well and good. But in many situations, that is not the case. We need to use the tool big O notation to express the ideas, express the properties of functions. Okay. So, I am going to digress a bit to discuss on big O notation, but before getting into the big O notation, I would like to challenge the audience here. Is it possible to improve this further? Consider the same n equal to 2 power k. Is it possible to yes?
If I'm standing at 0 point, then first to 1, then minus 1. Fine. Then before going to 0, I'll first move to minus 2, then to 0, then to 2,
Then to 2.
to 4, then to 0.
Yes. So that's a very important suggestion. Instead of looking at stage wise, in which I always come back to 0, I can do the next stage's work by going little ahead in the current stage itself. What I am doing now is, in a given stage, I start from, I visualize for 0, I go here up to 2 power k, then come back here, and then I am going to 2 power k minus 1, and then I am coming back here. Again for 2 power k plus 1, 2 power k plus 1 here, 2 power k plus 1 here, and then I am coming back. Right? Instead, in the previous stage, before coming back, had I gone there and then come back, and then before coming back here, if I go ahead and then come back, I am going to substantially save. Okay? So what will be now the savings? Please estimate. Now I have found out this. Quickly work out and tell me what will be the number of steps you would take if you follow this idea. First see how that idea works in this case, and then you see how that same idea works in this case. Okay, so I will tell you how the idea works here. From I to I minus 1 to I plus 1, if you want to go, wherever you are going to go one step ahead. Let's say from I minus 1 you go to I. From there you are going to go to minus I. So this is the extra steps that you would go from I minus 1 to I. From that I to I plus 1, if you want to go, you are there, whether here or here. One step you will go, and then you are going to sweep this I plus 1 and the other I plus 1. So 1 plus 2 into I plus 1. So sigma of this I equal to 1 to n minus 1, okay, plus, in the last step also 1 plus, if it is there you terminate with 1, otherwise, so it goes to I equal to 1 to n. When you say I equal to 1 to n, this becomes n into n plus 2 into I equal n into n plus 1 by 2 into 2. So here it cancels. Therefore, this is n square plus 2n. So here it is 2n square plus n, and this is n square plus 2n. 50% reduction. That simple idea suggested by her has led to significant saving. The computation explains everything to you. This is the purpose of analysis. It should comment on the quality of the solution, the complexity of the algorithm, the number of instructions you execute. Here it is physically number of steps that you take. That defines the complexity measure. Different solutions involve different labor. Now you are reducing the labor by coming up with the cleverer schemes. Instead of doing that, if you do like this, you end up walking less. If you are, instead of doing this, if you do for 2 power k like this, now tell me from 7n minus 4, where do you reduce it to? Alright. Here I could show 50% gain. Assess the gain in the strategy in that. Okay. Now, if some people are really excited about this, and if they give this, take them to the next level. What you can do is, right, if n is not power of 2, how do you get these steps? Another interesting generalization is, instead of one long street, imagine that you have several streets here, okay, and there is that gate somewhere, you don't know where it is. Now you have to locate it, right? How does it generalize? This kind of generalization, in fact, have practical application. This type of heuristics were used to locate in the archived tapes the data. How many times you have to move back and forth, you don't know where it is, and you don't know how far it is from the current position, but still you have to locate the data. Therefore, you have to write the device drivers, which if you simply keep on looking at everything starting from the beginning to the end of every tape, then it is a wasteful effort. So what they want to do is they would like to have a better faster way of locating, because each disk access consumes time, and the spinning, moving, etc. is an electromechanical one, and hence this problem is an abstraction of that one. Okay, although it is presented in a fashion which is a toy-like fashion, toy problem, it indeed has some interesting thing. So you should now design innovative exercises which, after triggering a thought process on a particular design strategy, give 1 or 2 exercises which will force him to apply that strategy and arrive at a solution, and have problem in which multiple solutions are possible, like this. Now you can see how this is opening up several possibilities. We have a 2n square plus n solution, we have n square plus 2n solution, we have 7n plus 4 solution, we have one more which you have to give me, and so on. And now different people will come up with different solutions, and when they discuss, then you see that this is how in the group discussion variety of ideas and other things will flow, and finally a good solution would emerge. You have to simulate that practice of iterated improvement. People have to learn by doing, seeing, observing, and watching the patterns and assess. Does that lead really to something? If her suggestion after all the addition again comes to 2n square plus n, then that is not that's not really improving. But after looking into it, we find that it is this which is a substantial saving here. So it is indeed a wiser move. Right. Now assess, if you make the same wise move in galloping mode, how much you would reduce. Okay. Now I don't have to spend time on it. Now that you got the hang of it, you can do that work tonight, and then tomorrow when we discuss, you can come back to me with your expression and back of the envelope computation. But the point is, always in explaining algorithms, we have to teach them as paradigms. We have to teach them as strategies and ideas. No algorithm should be projected as a solution to a problem. Here is a problem, this is the way you can solve it. Never teach that way. Within 12 hours, you have to give maximum imparting of knowledge is necessary. So everything you should see as a wise idea, a clever move, a way in which this has to be solved in a way better than the other one, competing solution for solving the same problem. All right. So let us come back to it, and then I will discuss another interesting idea. Of course, I can discuss a lot more on this, which I will do in a different series. We are contemplating what is known as a full-length description of a lot of contents related to algorithms, and then what you can do is you can pull out the material from that in a cafeteria model, because for incremental design, if I give some 6 case studies, and if those lectures are videotaped, then you can pull out any of the case study for your illustration, working, classroom training or assignment and so on. That is possible, but we need that master material at some place. That we are contemplating to develop, and that will be available over a period of time. But now I cannot explain all the good and wonderful problems which are solved using incremental design. That I can do if I have a 1 semester course, right? But within the short span, I have to explain different interesting ideas and explain how a solution is to be obtained using these methods. Therefore, I am going to give sampler of case studies for each design strategy. So I am going to move on quickly to another interesting design strategy, and this is very popularly known as divide and conquer. So the divide and conquer method works as follows. Here is the pattern for divide and conquer strategy. In divide and conquer, you split the input into several smaller disjoint parts. Okay. So you are given a problem P, input to a problem P, input of problem P, and this input will be split into, let us say, 2 smaller sized input, I1, I2. What is important is I1 and I2 are disjoint. Okay, they are split into smaller one and they are disjoint. On this, you solve the problem and get the solution S1, and on this you solve and get S2. When you do like this, you are going to formulate it as a problem which resembles the original problem. That is very important. If it does not resemble the original problem, then it is called a decomposition. Decomposition means take a big problem, break them into smaller problems, solve each one of them. Okay? That is decomposing a bigger problem into smaller problems. If you split a bigger problem into a smaller problem that resembles the original problem, then it is a divide and conquer. Okay, and then what you do is you put these solutions and get the solution for this input. So this is called divide. This is called conquer, and this is done usually through recursion. That is because you have now split the original problem into smaller problem that resemble the original one. So recursion will be, and this is called marrying. So every divide and conquer solution you will see these 3 discernible parts. You will take some effort to split, you will solve the subproblems recursively, then you will attempt to put those solutions together and finally arrive at the answer. This is how the divide and conquer strategy will look like. Notice that this does not tell you how to divide. Okay? You may have to arrive at a very clever style of dividing. That depends on the problem. And again, it doesn't tell you how to put these solutions together. And worst of it is, doing all of them is not really guaranteed to give you a better solution either. This is one way of solving a problem. When people attempted this, sometime they discovered something very exciting and interesting. They could improve the complexity of the solution. They could come up with really more efficient solution. Therefore, this is recognized as a very powerful paradigm, very powerful tool for solving problems. For the new problem that you encounter, if this is applicable and if the analysis reveals that this is indeed more efficient than whatever you know, then you got a better solution now based on this strategy. Okay? So, let us grasp this strategy by seeing how it is going to look like. Right? How it is going to simply look like. The problem which I am going to discuss, this is called finding the maximum and minimum. I am choosing this problem for several reasons. Okay? One is, it has got some application in practice. You have to find the maximum and minimum of n numbers. Typically, this is an application in computer graphics where scaling related transformation, when you want to do, you have to take all the points, put in a window, and if you want to zoom or contract, you have to divide or expand the interdistances by the scaling factors. So, you want to find the maximum distance and minimum height. So, you want to find the maximum, you want to find the minimum. The difference between these two gives you the appropriate scaling factors. Okay? So, that is the application, but the problem in simple form is that given an array A of n, let us say, integers, you have to find maximum and find minimum. You know how to find maximum and you know how to find minimum very easily. The incremental solution you know. Okay? So, max equal to A1 for I equal to 2 to n, max equal to, you update this. Similarly, for I equal to 2 to n, min equal to, similarly, min equal to A1, same updating. Okay. Very easily you can write this code. Now, I will tell you something about code tuning. What we mean by code tuning, by the very terminology, you think of the codes now. You are not talking of the idea, right? You are now talking of the implementation. Every code tuning is concerned with how you would, when you take it to implementation, you would get some efficiency there. Since you are implementing that idea, you are not going to save even one computation or one comparison that is suggested by the algorithm. So, where you can gain is in the bookkeeping mechanism. Okay? So, all code tuning is concerned with bookkeeping related activities at the time of designing the code or implementing. Do not get confused between code tuning with algorithmic efficiency. Algorithmic efficiency is purely concerned with the labor involved in the process. Code tuning is take that algorithm and when you try to implement, when you write a program, what kind of efficiency can be brought forth. Here I have an algorithm, and if I implement in this way, then you see that there is a for loop index here which is created and updated. Again there is another for loop index which is created and updated again and again. Okay? So, I am doing some wasteful computation here. Instead, I can write like this: max equal to A1, min equal to A1 for I equal to 2 to n. Okay? If max is less than AI, then max equal to ai, else if min is greater than ai, min equal to ai. So you compare like this, and now there is only one loop index need to be updated. Here also you are comparing the min with this, and here also you are comparing and updating. Every computation is done, but in this one there are two loop index related computation. Physically time is consumed for that, whereas here there is only one loop. This is called loop jamming. Okay, but notice that my algorithm is same, the number of comparison done, everything is same, except that now I decide to code it in a different way, which is bringing me certain kind of efficiency. Okay. In some case, for example, you can do loop unrolling. Loop unrolling means the following. Suppose for I equal to 1 to 3, you do that. You are doing some statement, let us say you do some computation. Here now you have to initiate the loop index, update it, and then you instead probably you can expand that and then write those statement, and that would be saving some computation. Anyway you have to do those computation, but now the loop index computation has become an unnecessary overhead. So unrolling of small loops are bringing in substantial amount of interesting speed up, but this speed up is in the run time. It is not a speed up in complexity. Okay, this is not, this algorithm as this implementation as well as this implementation will perform 2n-2 comparisons, n-1 comparisons for maximum, n-1 comparisons for minimum. Okay, so complexity is same, but running time could be different. That is because I have eliminated some bookkeeping. These are called code tuning. We will talk of more on code tuning, and then integrate how and then we will see a full overview of ultimate efficiency of the product. We have to look at several parameters and then see the final gain. Okay, code tuning is one aspect of bringing in efficiency. First, I take a problem and I basically improve on it and then get a better algorithm, and after the algorithmic level improvement, I can now take it to the system level, and here I can do certain code tuning and gain further speed up, and in this way I can have some cumulative effect of the efficiency and speed up if I could combine in a clever way. Okay, but no amount of your code tuning strategy is going to make a bad algorithm a good one. Okay, you take this factorial determinant finding, do any trick that you want to do. If it is exponential, if it is factorial n steps, it is going to be factorial n forever, and you are not going to finish it in less than 10,000 years. No amount of code tuning is going to save you there. That's because basically it is a bad algorithm. The inherent labor involved in that is running into trillions and trillions of steps, and by the time you finish executing all of them, it is 10,000 years gone. Okay, so you should know where to apply it, how to get a cumulative effect, and so on. But I am just touching on code tuning to tell you how the loop jamming can be done here as a simple example. We are going to see some interesting non-trivial example in our subsequent discussions. Okay, so this is an incremental based solution. Can we now look at a different way of solving? Can we apply this method and then see what happens? Because there is no guarantee that this will be better than the other one, but we can see, we can try this idea. So if you want to solve that, how do I solve it? I can do the following. Suppose it is going to be recursive, so find min max a 1 dot dot n, min max, let us say, right. Suppose these are the parameters, just to specify. What I can do is, okay, find min max of A 1 dot dot n by 2 min 1 max 1. Find min max of A n by 2 plus 1 dot dot n min 2 max 2. Right. What I have done is I have split into two parts. Okay, if n is 71, what will you do? If it is n is 81, what will you do? Well, you make one as 40, another as 41. The standard computer science trick is make one of them lower integral part, and that will take care of this integer index business. So, find min max of this. So, for the first half you take an array. For the first half the minimum and maximum is min 1 and max 1. For the second part minimum and maximum is min 1 and min 2 and max 2. Now, I have to find the overall minimum and maximum. So, how to find the min? So, how do I combine these solutions? Min equal to minimum of min 1 and min 2 and max equal to maximum of max 1 and max 2. But how do you find minimum of two numbers? Just compare them and store that in min. Similarly, how do you compare the maximum of two numbers? Compare them, and so what you can do is that this you can find in one comparison and this you can find in one comparison. So, in two comparisons you will be able to find it. Okay. It is possible for you to find in two. So, I will go up to 6 and then wind up today's discussion. Another 10 minutes, whatever I could discuss in 10 minutes I will do, and later on I would continue it if as appropriate. So, min 1 and max 1 is, every recursive algorithm must terminate, otherwise the recursion cannot be meaningfully implemented. So, one way to terminate is, how do you handle the trivial instance? We have seen here I equal to min equal to a1, max equal to a1. So, what you can say is, if n equal to 1, right, if there is only one item in this, then min equal to a1, max equal to a1, else the whole recursion proceeds. Okay. Now, I run into a very big problem. How many comparisons are done by this method is not clear. In my earlier method, I know how many comparisons are done. I could physically count. In for loop, I went into the body. In each step, one comparison. Loop iterates n minus 1 times. So, n minus 1 comparison for max, n minus 1 comparison for min, totally 2n minus 2 comparisons. I could tell you clearly it is 2n minus 2 comparison. But how many comparisons are done by this method? It is not even clear, right? What if the number of comparisons done by this method is n square plus 7? Then this is a stupid idea, right? So, I have to know how many are done here. So, the only way to analyze a recursive program is to set up appropriate recurrence equation, and you should solve it. Okay? If you don't know how to solve a recurrence equation, then you cannot analyze recursive methods. Every recursive method, in order to assess the labor involved in it, you have to set up the appropriate recurrence equation and study the values of that recurrence equation. Okay? Here, the way in which you set up the recurrence equation is as follows. Let Tn denote the number of comparisons done by the algorithm on an input of size n, or on an array of size n. Then Tn is not given by any explicit formula, it is given like this: T of n equal to There is some number of comparison done by here. How many? According to this notation, it is T of lower integral part of n by 2 plus T of remaining n minus lower integral part of n by 2 plus remaining whatever is the number of item, that many comparison. If this is the notation, then this many comparisons are done here, whatever it is, and this many comparisons are done here, plus 2 more comparisons. And if n equal to 1, you don't do any comparison, T of 1 equal to 0. It is a matter of simple fact to see that n minus lower integral part of n by 2 is nothing but upper integral part of n by 2. This you can prove by considering 2 cases, n is even, n is odd, that is all. If n is even like 80, what is lower integral part of n by 2? 40. Upper integral part of n by 2 is also 40, so this is true. If n is odd like 81, lower integral part is n by 2 is 40, upper integral part is 41, because 81 by 2 is 40.5, so one is 41, another is 40, so you get this straight, very straightforward. This is the recurrence equation. So this is called the complexity function expressed in recursive form. It is not in closed form. Okay, that is the biggest problem. In the previous case study, we have 2 complexity functions, both are in closed form. One algorithm had 2n square plus n, another algorithm had 7n minus 4. We are able to compare clearly. Now, one algorithm has 2n minus 2, another one is tn. Well, I don't know what tn is, but I know that tn satisfies this equation, that is all. How do I compare this with 2n minus 2? If this is 6n minus 8, then I know that, hey, this is a dumb algorithm, right? I have already 2n minus 2 algorithm, why should I worry about 6n minus 2? After all, divide, conquer, all those things is a waste of effort. So I must know how much it is. In other words, I have to find tn in closed form, and this is called the solving of recurrence. Solving of recurrence equation is an art. It is a deep mathematical art. It is a branch of mathematics called combinatorics, and only books on combinatorics will tell you how to solve this kind of equation. Okay? Therefore, it is better these things are either learnt formally in a course, or on a need based you go to that recurrence equation and then look into some books and references and then solve them. There are about 4 to 5 important patterns of recurrence equation that arises in most of the first level encounters. If you know how to solve them, that is sufficient to begin with, but that may not be sufficient when you go to really advanced levels, or when you face a tougher challenge, that may not be sufficient. But most of them you may be able to work with 3 or 4 techniques. Simple thumb rules and techniques will do. Okay? In a short program like this, you can have only a catalog and you can give that as a handout. Simply prepare a small bunch of recurrence equations and their solutions, see that this is how it is going to work, and then you hand it over. That is enough, because if the people have done already a course on computer science, they would know everything, and it is only a recollection. If they have not done it, they must learn this. They have to read your manuscript and then see how you have actually solved and so on. But this can be done off the record, okay, of the teaching. You don't have to explain everything and then spend a lot of time in. Although I am going to do it briefly, it is not necessary to do this. Okay. Typically, a recurrence equation of this type is solved by looking at initially some values and see whether you are able to get any pattern, and then you can conjecture, verify, and finally establish that as the solution for that equation. Okay. So that being the standard strategy, we can try that out here. One of the standard strategies. There are some recurrence equations which have standard solution. If it is like this, the solution is going to be like that. We can say that. For example, if t of n equal to twice t of n by 2 plus order n, then the solution, it could be 7n or 4n, it does not matter, whatever is the constant here, then t of n is order n log n. So again you see that I am using big O, and I have to again caution you how to do that. I am going to do that tomorrow. That's because I have not introduced yet something which will require explanation in terms of what big O can give you and what big O is not giving you. You have to encounter such functions, and only then you will be able to understand. That's why I am now taking you through certain functions which will offer the clarification on this. Okay. So if you look at the value like this, you can try these values. For n equal to 1, it is 0. For n equal to 2, this is 0 plus 0, all right, because t of 1 plus t of 1, which is 0 plus 0 plus 2. For 3, it is t of 1, which is 0, t of 2, which is 2, plus 2, 2 plus 2, which is 4. Similarly, for 4, t of 2 plus t of 2 plus 2, which is 6. For 5, t of 2 plus t of 3 plus 2. So 2 plus 4, 6 plus 2, 8. Looks like 2, 4, 6, 8 and all tells you it is like 2n-ish, except that one shift, therefore it is like 2 into n minus 1 basically. And so t of n is indeed 2n minus 1, 2 into n minus 1. Okay. So our first attempt has shown that we have come up with a different method. It is interesting, it is good, and it is a paradigm, it is a new pattern. The solution looks very different from my 2-pass method. I split and then solve recursively, put them together, and it's a totally different idea. But unfortunately, my new idea has not given me any additional advantage, because now I could see that t of n is 2n minus 2. Okay. So the question is, can we improve further? And the answer is yes, and we are going to do it using standard strategies that are used for improving recursion, and that I will continue tomorrow. So we are going to we are not going to lose the hope on divide and conquer. We are going to see how this divide and conquer can be used cleverly, and we can gain something substantial out of this scenario. Okay. So this takes us gradually into a technique, familiarity with a technique, and proper application and improper application of a technique. All experience you will be able to give using one case study. What is important is, since you have only 12 hours or 15 hours or a very limited number of hours, you have to choose a case study that runs through maximum experience and insight to be given to the audience. With one example, you have to give lot of ideas. Okay, plenty of ideas you should give. So the case study that I have chosen is introducing you notion of recurrence equation, solving strategies, improving this, handling recursion, comparing with other methodologies. Okay, all these features will be explained through this single case study. So I am at a stage where I am stopping at this juncture with a remark that we tried a new method, but the new method is no better than the simple-minded, clean method I have in mind. Is all hope lost? No, and we will see how to get some mileage out of this strategy by looking at standard ways of improving recursive codes. Okay. So I stop at this point, and then when I continue, I will have to anyway solve recurrence equations, and I will explain about this big O, small o, and theta, and all notations that are needed. Have a thorough understanding of that, because you are going to use that as a language to communicate your ideas. So you should have a thorough understanding of that. Without that, it is not possible to talk on algorithms and complexity. All right. So let us know the vocabulary precisely and unambiguously. That will be done tomorrow, after introducing certain functions which have to be spoken in terms of that language. And there you will discover what can go wrong and what should be done in a right way, and so on. Okay, that I will do tomorrow. All right. Any question that you have?
Professor, in this, you solved that recurrence relation T of n equal to T of n by 2 plus T of
Yeah,
is the difference between the lower and the upper,
yeah.
floor and the ceiling will be 1. Anyway, we are going to use big O notation. So why can't we take it as 2 T n by 2 plus 2?
2 Tn by 2.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you can take that. It gives an upper bound. Right?
Yeah, anyway, we are going to find the upper bound. That is the big. We are going to represent using big O notation.
No. The problem is this. You can do that. But the problem here is the following. Sometimes weakening like that will lead you to a very weak upper bound. Alright? So what you might get is it is less than or equal to n square. You will get something like that. That's not a useful information. It is a truth, but there is no use out of that. While it is indeed less than or equal to 3n, if you show that it is less than or equal to 3n square, it doesn't serve any purpose. What will happen is that if we keep weakening